Ethan Wells was a billionaire who lived in a world of sharp suits, skyscrapers, and boardroom battles. His life was measured in profits, acquisitions, and private jet schedules. But beneath the surface, he carried a loneliness that no amount of money could cure. One evening, en route to a secluded retreat, a wrong turn sent him deep into rural countryside. His luxury car broke down near a town so small it barely appeared on the map. Frustrated, he walked toward the only diner with lights still on. Inside, country music played softly, and the smell of fresh pie filled the air. A young woman with tired eyes and a warm smile approached him. She asked if he needed help, and Ethan's world quietly began to shift. Her name was Lily Grace, a waitress who worked long shifts to care for her sick mother. She had never traveled far from the town of Willow Springs, but her dreams stretched miles beyond. Ethan watched her move gracefully between tables, offering genuine kindness to each customer. He was intrigued by her calm strength and effortless warmth. When she returned to his table, he ordered coffee and a slice of apple pie. "Rough night?" she asked, placing the plate before him. Ethan hesitated, then replied, "You could say that." She chuckled gently, and something inside him softened. The diner was nearly empty when Lily took her break. She joined Ethan at the booth, curious about the stranger in expensive shoes. He tried to hide his wealth, telling her he worked in finance, but she didn't pry. They talked about music, hometowns, and how people never really forget their roots. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen, not for his fortune, but for his words. As the rain outside tapped against the windows, Lily offered him directions to the nearest inn. Before leaving, Ethan glanced back at her and smiled. He didn't know why, but something told him he'd return soon. The next morning, Ethan found himself back at the diner, claiming he'd forgotten his phone charger. Lily greeted him with a raised brow and a knowing grin. She poured him coffee without asking and slid a menu his way. "So, do all finance guys get lost in the woods?" she teased. "Only the ones who need a reminder of what matters," he replied, surprising even himself. They talked more, and he learned about her love for painting and her childhood horse Daisy. She confessed she never expected to do more than serve coffee and care for her mom. Ethan, listening intently, was captivated by her resilience. Days passed, and Ethan postponed his return to the city. He told his assistant he needed a break from everything. Every morning he went to the diner, and every day he found new reasons to stay. Lily introduced him to the locals, people with calloused hands and big hearts. He helped fix the diner's broken ice machine, and even delivered groceries for her elderly neighbor. Each small act pulled him deeper into this slower, more meaningful world. At night, he walked under the stars, wondering why peace had taken so long to find him. Lily grew fond of Ethan, though she didn't quite understand him. He was different from the men around town, gentle, curious, and oddly humble. She noticed the way he listened when she spoke, as if her words carried weight. Yet something about him remained carefully guarded. One evening, they sat outside the diner sharing fries from a paper tray. "Why are you really here?" she asked softly. Ethan hesitated, the night air cool against his skin. "Because I needed to find something real," he finally said. And with that, a fragile trust began to form. Rumors started spreading around town about the new man at the diner. Some thought he was a lost tourist, others whispered he was a spy or a writer. Lily defended him when the questions turned suspicious. She didn't care who he had been, she cared about who he was with her. Still, the mystery lingered, and Ethan knew he couldn't hide forever. He decided to tell her the truth, fearing it might drive her away. After closing time, he sat her down and confessed everything: his fortune, his company, his life in New York. Lily listened in silence, then simply asked, "Do you think money makes you better than anyone here?" Ethan shook his head, ashamed. "No," he said. "That's the very reason I ran from it." Lily studied him with unreadable eyes, then stood up slowly. "Then you better prove it," she said, walking away. The next day, Ethan returned. To the diner not as a billionaire, but as a volunteer dishwasher. He worked beside Lily all morning, scrubbing pans and mopping floors. It was messy, humbling work, and exactly what he needed. The regulars teased him, but he took it in stride. At the end of the shift, Lily offered him a root beer and a smile. "Not bad for a rich guy," she joked. Ethan started spending time outside the diner, helping around town. He volunteered at the local shelter and even repaired the library's broken door. Each day, he felt more grounded, more human. The suits and conference calls felt like a distant past. Lily and Ethan began spending evenings together, walking, along dirt roads and watching sunsets. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments that spoke louder than words. Still, Ethan feared the spell might break at any time. He worried about what would happen when the city called him back. But, for now, he was exactly where he wanted to be. Lily's mother, June, finally met Ethan and was skeptical at first. "Men like you don't stay long in towns like this," she warned. But Ethan was patient, kind, and helped June fix her back porch steps. Slowly, June warmed to him, especially when she saw the way he looked at her daughter. One evening, after a long shift, Lily took Ethan to her favorite childhood spot, a hilltop with a view of the valley. As fireflies blinked in the dark, she whispered, "I don't want this to end." Ethan took her hand, heart pounding. "Neither do I," he replied, meaning every word. Summer in Willow Springs was something Ethan had never experienced, warm, golden, and rich with quiet joy. He and Lily began spending more time together outside the diner, exploring trails and rivers she'd loved since childhood. Ethan learned to fish, helped paint the town's community center, and even tried his hand at country dancing. Locals who once eyed him with suspicion now greeted him with nods and smiles. Lily watched it all with cautious hope, afraid to believe it would last. Despite his sincerity, she couldn't ignore the question in her heart. Would he really stay? One afternoon, as they sat by the riverbank, she asked, "What happens when the city calls you back?" Ethan looked at her, serious and still. "What if I don't answer?" he replied. Meanwhile, Ethan's absence in New York wasn't going unnoticed. His assistant, Margaret, had been managing his empire, but cracks were forming. Shareholders demanded answers, and rivals were circling. Ethan ignored the calls, focused entirely on his new life. But Margaret knew her boss well. Something, or someone, had changed him. She booked a flight and arrived in Willow Springs unannounced. Walking into the diner in heels that didn't belong on a dusty road, she scanned the room. When she saw Ethan wiping tables in an apron, her jaw nearly dropped. "What on earth are you doing?" she asked. Ethan only smiled and said, "Living." Margaret pulled him aside and explained the urgent situation back in New York. The company was in danger, and only he could calm the board. Ethan felt torn between two worlds, the empire he built and the peace he'd found. Lily overheard the conversation, and her heart sank. She had hoped, maybe foolishly, that this place could be enough for him. That night, they walked in silence, beneath the stars. "You should go," Lily said quietly. "You belong to a different life." Ethan took her hand and said, "No, I belong wherever you are." But they both knew things were no longer that simple. After a restless night, Ethan made his decision. He would fly to New York for 48 hours, no more. "I'll fix what needs fixing, then I'll come home," he promised Lily. She nodded, hiding her doubt behind a tight smile. As he drove off, the town felt colder, quieter. Without Ethan's laughter and presence, the diner felt heavier. Meanwhile, in New York, Ethan walked back into his glass tower and was instantly drowned in pressure. Meetings, questions, and chaos consumed him. But through it all, his thoughts never left Willow Springs. He realized that power without love meant nothing. Back in Willow Springs, Lily tried to carry on. She told herself not to wait, not to hope. June watched her daughter and knew she was heartbroken, though Lily never said a word. One evening, the townspeople gathered for the annual summer fair, Lily attended, trying to smile for everyone's sake. She wore a simple blue dress and carried memories like weight. As fireworks lit the sky, she whispered Ethan's name to the stars. Meanwhile, Ethan stood in his New York office, staring out at the skyline. He called Margaret in and said, "I'm selling everything." She blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. Ethan explained his plan. He would liquidate assets, step down as CEO, and leave the corporate world behind. "You're walking away from billions," Margaret said. "I'm walking towards something better," he replied. Despite her protests, Ethan was resolute. 2 days later, he returned to Willow Springs, exhausted but relieved. He drove straight to the diner, only to find it closed early. Confused, he asked a neighbor where Lily was. "Fairgrounds," the man said. Ethan rushed there, scanning the crowd beneath the colorful lights. Then he saw her, spinning slowly under lanterns, her face soft with longing. And in that moment, he knew he'd come home. Lily turned and saw him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You came back," she whispered. "I never really left," he replied, stepping closer. She wanted to be angry, to tell him how much it hurt, but all she could do was throw her arms around him. They stood under the Ferris wheel, wrapped in each other like a promise. He told her everything, his decision to leave the business, to build a life with her. "You don't need to give up everything," she said gently. "But I do," Ethan replied, "because you're the everything I've been missing." The following week, Ethan started putting down roots in Willow Springs. He bought an old farmhouse just outside of town and began restoring it. Lily helped pick paint colors and plant wildflowers in the front yard. Together, they made it a home, not just a house. The town began to embrace him fully, and Ethan embraced them back. He sponsored a scholarship for local students and reopened the town's shuttered community center. People no longer saw him as a stranger. They saw him as one of their own. Lily, watching him laugh with children and dance at town. Events fell deeper in love every day, but peace is never without challenge. A journalist from a major magazine caught wind of Ethan's disappearance and tracked him down. The article painted their love story as a billionaire fairy tale, and suddenly reporters began showing up. Cameras flashed outside the diner, disrupting the quiet life they'd built. Lily felt exposed, her privacy shattered. "I didn't sign up for this," she told Ethan, tears in her eyes. "I know," he said, holding her tightly. "I'll fix it. I won't let the world take you from me." He reached out to a lawyer and had all reporters legally barred from the town limits. In the quiet that followed, Lily and Ethan reassessed everything. They sat on their porch watching fireflies and talked about the future. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "Not for a second." He told her he wanted to marry her, not someday, but soon. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I never thought someone like you would choose someone like me." Ethan cupped her face and said, "Then you never saw what I see when I look at you." That night, under a sky full of stars, he proposed, and with a trembling smile, she said yes. Wedding preparations began quietly, just the way Lily wanted. She didn't care for grand venues or designer gowns. All she wanted was to marry the man who changed her life. Ethan insisted on doing things her way, even though he could have bought the whole town. Together, they chose a clearing in the woods where the trees whispered in the breeze. Friends and neighbors offered to help, baking pies, arranging flowers, sewing dresses. The entire town felt like family, rallying around the unlikely couple. June, now in better health, wept as she watched her daughter prepare for joy. Lily's happiness was no longer a dream. It was becoming real. And every step forward made her believe a little more in forever. Ethan's former life tried to call him back one last time. His name appeared in headlines, stock markets buzzed, and his board begged him to reconsider. He declined every call, every offer, with calm certainty. "I'm building something better now," he told one persistent caller. The old Ethan might have cared about power, but the new Ethan cared about peace. Even Margaret called, this time just to say she was proud of him. "I didn't think you'd really do it," she said. "Neither did I," he admitted with a laugh. As the wedding day approached, he felt lighter than ever. Money had once built his world, now love did. The wedding day arrived with sunlight, breaking through the trees. Lily wore a simple lace dress, barefoot in the grass, her hair pinned with wildflowers. Ethan wore rolled sleeves and a crooked tie, nervous and beaming. June walked her daughter down the aisle with steady steps, eyes shining with pride. The town gathered around, sitting on benches and hay bales, wiping their eyes as vows were exchanged. "I choose you every day," Ethan said, voice shaking with emotion. "I choose this life, this love, and this truth." When they kissed, cheers rang out through the woods, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly right. Fates. Newlyweds didn't jet off to an exotic honeymoon. They stayed in Willow Springs. Their farmhouse became a sanctuary of love, laughter, and quiet joy. Ethan built a workshop where he repaired old furniture and taught local teens about business and craftsmanship. Lily painted again, filling their home with color and heart. They hosted Sunday dinners, planted a vegetable garden, and danced barefoot in the kitchen. The life they created was simple but deeply rich, and every time Ethan looked at Lily, he saw the woman who saved him from himself. Love didn't need skyscrapers, it just needed roots. Months passed and seasons changed, but their love remained steady. On cold nights, they curled up by the fire, reading books and sipping cider. On warm days, they walked the same dirt roads that once held questions, now filled with memories. Ethan still struggled at times, old habits, old doubts, but Lily's hand always brought him back. She reminded him of who he had become and who he was still growing into. He, in turn, reminded her that she was never small, never unworthy of great things. Together, they made each other better, and that was the real magic of their love. One morning, Lily woke up feeling different. She held the secret close to her, chest for a few days, unsure how to share it. Then, over breakfast, she slid a tiny pair of baby socks across the table. Ethan stared at them, then at her, eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you serious?" he asked, barely able to breathe. She nodded, tears brimming. He stood, pulled her into his arms, and whispered, "This is everything." The news spread quickly, and the town rejoiced as if it were their own child on the way. New life was coming, and with it, a deeper kind of joy. The pregnancy brought new challenges, but Ethan was by Lily's side through every moment. He built a crib from scratch, read every parenting book he could find, and attended every doctor's appointment. Lily painted a mural on the nursery wall, rolling hills, blooming flowers, and a rising sun. June became even more involved, helping with recipes and baby clothes. Ethan often sat on the porch at night, hand on Lily's belly, talking to the child they hadn't met yet. "You're going to be so loved," he'd whisper. And Lily, listening to his voice, knew she had made the right choice in loving him. Labor came during a stormy night, thunder echoing through the hills. Ethan drove Lily to the small local hospital, hands shaking but heart steady. Hours passed, filled with pain, worry, and hope. When the doctor finally said, "It's a girl," both parents wept with joy. They named her Grace, after Lily's grandmother. Holding their daughter, Ethan felt a love deeper than anything he'd ever known. He kissed Lily's forehead and whispered, "You gave me everything." And Lily, exhausted and glowing, replied, "You gave me a future." Together they began a new chapter, one heartbeat at a time. Grace grew quickly, with Ethan and Lily savoring every moment. She had her father's eyes and her mother's quiet strength. The diner became a place filled with high chairs and coloring, books. Locals stopped by just to see the little miracle who had changed their town. Ethan rarely spoke of his past life, but when he did, it was only to show Grace the importance of choosing love over gold. They taught her about kindness, community, and dreaming big, and every night they tucked her in with stories that always ended in hope. Grace would grow up surrounded by love, laughter, and purpose. Years later, Ethan stood on the same hilltop where he had once proposed. Lily stood beside him, her hand in his, watching Grace chase fireflies. The town had grown, slowly and gently, but never lost its soul. The farmhouse was still their haven, filled with memories and morning light. Ethan had never gone back to the boardroom, and he never missed it. He had found the only wealth that mattered in a place he never meant to visit. As twilight settled around them, Lily leaned on his shoulder and whispered, "You still happy?" Ethan kissed her temple and replied, "More than I ever knew I could be." And beneath a sky full of stars, their love continued to bloom.